Have you ever sat alone at night, staring at your phone, heart heavy, wondering where it all went wrong, wondering why she left or why you had to walk away? You play back the good times like a movie you can't turn off, hoping the ending might change. But let me ask you something. What if losing her wasn't the tragedy you think it is? What if it was the beginning of something far more powerful? The rediscovery of you. You see, we're conditioned to believe that when someone walks out of your life, you're left with less than you had before. That you're incomplete now, that love lost means value lost. But let me tell you something only pain can teach you. Sometimes what feels like loss is actually liberation, because the truth is, you didn't lose her. You found yourself when she was in your life. Maybe you bent yourself to fit into her world. You compromised your boundaries. You ignored your voice. You silenced your needs just to keep the peace, to avoid the argument, to be enough. And little by little, piece by piece, you disappeared. But when she left, or when you found the strength to walk away, that silence you feared, it became your classroom. That loneliness, it became your mirror. That heartbreak, it cracked the shell of who you thought you had to be, and exposed who you really are. You stopped seeking validation from someone else and started validating your own worth. You stopped chasing closure from her and began creating clarity within. You stopped asking, why wasn't I enough for her, and started realizing you were never meant to be small enough to fit into someone else's limited idea of love. You didn't lose her, you gained the you that you left behind. The version of you that's strong, that knows peace over pleasing, that isn't afraid of being alone because now you understand that solitude isn't emptiness. It's freedom, freedom to think, freedom to grow, freedom to become. Let me be real with you. It hurts, of course it does. Losing someone you gave your heart to is no small pain, but don't let the pain convince you that you're broken. It's just the necessary fire that burns off everything you're not, so you can see clearly everything you truly are. This isn't a chapter about losing love. It's a chapter about reclaiming you. Maybe she was never meant to stay forever. Maybe she was just the mirror that showed you where you were hiding from yourself. And maybe, just maybe, her leaving was life's way of guiding you home. So, don't mourn her absence more than you celebrate your return. Don't romanticize the version of you that needed her to feel whole. Instead, fall in love with the version of you that rose from that grief, that stood back up, that decided I am enough with or without her. Now breathe. Look in the mirror and say it with your chest, I didn't lose her. I found myself. And that's the kind of love that never leaves. That's the kind of love that finally feels like home. You didn't lose her. You found yourself. That statement alone flips the narrative we've been fed about love, heartbreak, and self-worth, because when you're in love, especially deeply, it's easy to wrap your identity around someone else. You begin to see your value through their eyes, measure your happiness by their mood, and shape your decisions around what makes them stay. So when the relationship ends, it feels like everything's been ripped away. The love, the future, and even your sense of self. But what you don't realize in that moment is that you didn't just lose a person. You were given the chance to come back to the most important relationship of your life, the one you have with yourself. That pain you're feeling is not just heartbreak. It's the discomfort of rebirth. It's your soul calling you to reconnect, realign, and remember who you were before the world told you that you needed someone else to be whole. Maybe she was amazing. Maybe she loved you in her own way. Maybe you had beautiful moments. But if being with her meant forgetting who you are, if it meant shrinking yourself, compromising your peace, or accepting less than what you truly needed, then letting her go was the beginning of something far more powerful. People often think that the end of a relationship is the end of love, but in truth, it's often the first time you're invited to love yourself properly. When the noise of their presence fades, you start to hear your own voice again. You remember the things you put aside. your dreams, your passions, your principles. You reconnect with your strength. You get to explore your solitude and finally realize that you're not broken. You're healing. You're growing. You're becoming someone who doesn't chase validation, but cultivates inner peace. The nights may be quiet now, the phone might not ring, but in that silence, you begin to truly listen to your heart. The emptiness you feared starts to feel like space. Space to grow, to dream, to expand into who you were always meant to be. And that discovery is sacred. Because when you find yourself again, you stop needing someone else to tell you that you're enough. You know you're enough, and the truth is, some people come into your life not to stay, but to teach. She might have been the one who awakened something in you, but her departure was what allowed that awakening to fully bloom. There is a strength in heartbreak that only those who have walked through it can understand. You emerge with deeper compassion, stronger boundaries, and a clearer vision for your life. You no longer cling to what was because you start to see the beauty in what's becoming. You begin to walk taller, speak clearer, and live more authentically, and while the past might still sting, it no longer defines you. You realize that what you thought was the end was really a beginning in disguise. Most people fear being alone after a breakup because they associate solitude with emptiness, with lack, with something being wrong. But the truth is, being alone doesn't mean you're broken. It means you now have the opportunity to finally listen to yourself. For so long, your mind was filled with someone else's opinions, needs, and desires. You were constantly adjusting, adapting, trying to fit into a shared space where you didn't always feel seen or heard. Now that you're alone, you have the silence to confront the parts of yourself that were neglected. And at first, that silence can be loud and overwhelming. It echoes all the doubts, the fears, the memories you tried to suppress. But if you lean into it, if you resist the urge to escape or fill it with distractions, you'll begin to uncover clarity that was impossible before. You'll notice how much of your life revolved around making her happy. How often you said yes when you meant no. How frequently you put your needs on the back burner just to keep the peace. And this isn't about blaming her. It's about acknowledging how easy it is to abandon yourself when you're afraid of losing someone. When you sit with your solitude long enough, it begins to transform. You begin to reclaim your voice. You remember what it feels like to choose for yourself. You no longer compromise your boundaries just to feel safe in someone else's company. Instead, you build a sense of safety within. You stop searching for approval and start standing in your truth. Being alone teaches you self-trust. It teaches you that you can survive heartbreak, not just survive it, but grow through it, evolve because of it. You begin to take up space in your own life again. You start doing things you put off. You pursue goals you once postponed. You engage with people who reflect your growth, not your fears. You become someone who values peace over attachment, authenticity over comfort. Solitude becomes sacred because it's the space where you become whole again. There's power in waking up and realizing you don't need someone to complete you, that you can be alone and not feel lonely, that your joy is no longer dependent on anyone else's presence or approval. This is the season of rebuilding from within, of turning inward and finding the parts of yourself you forgot about, the parts that are passionate, curious, grounded, and whole. You don't just learn to live without her, you learn to live for yourself. You develop emotional muscles that can't be built when someone else is holding you up all the time. You learn to walk on your own, think on your own, feel on your own, and it changes everything. You become a person who doesn't settle out of fear, but chooses out of alignment. That's the real reward of solitude. It gives you back to yourself. You finally realize that the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one you build with you. When a relationship ends, especially one that held a deep emotional grip on your heart, it's easy to assume you were rejected because you weren't enough. That narrative plays on repeat in your mind. You weren't good enough, attractive enough, successful enough, or worthy enough to be chosen and kept. But that narrative is flawed, and more importantly, it's dangerous. It convinces you to measure your value based on someone else's ability to recognize it. And the moment you start seeking your worth in another person's perception, you give them the power to define you. What you have to understand is this: someone's inability to love you the way you need it has nothing to do with your worth. Love is not proof of value. Sometimes, the people we want the most are the ones least capable of loving us in the way our soul requires. And yet, we chase them. We try harder, give more, shrink further. We mold ourselves into versions we think they'll finally accept. And with every compromise, every swallowed truth, every red flag ignored, we lose a piece of who we are. Not because we're weak, but because we believe that if we can just be enough, we can make them stay. That illusion keeps us stuck in cycles of self-abandonment. We start to accept crumbs and call it a feast. We confuse emotional highs and lows for passion. We start to believe that love is supposed to hurt, that being chosen is a prize, and that our job is to earn it. But real love doesn't ask you to become less. Real love doesn't make you feel like you're walking on eggshells or competing for space in someone's life. Real love sees you, accepts you, respects your boundaries, and wants to grow with you, not at the cost of you. And when you realize this, you stop asking why you weren't enough for her. Instead, you begin asking why you ever thought you had to prove your worth in the first place. That shift is powerful. It moves you from victimhood to ownership. You stop chasing closure and start creating clarity. You recognize that your worth was never tied to someone's ability to love you right. It was always within you. It was simply buried under layers of emotional conditioning, heartbreak, and unmet needs. Walking away, or being walked away from, becomes a turning point. It's the moment you're forced to meet yourself again, to confront the places where you compromised, to forgive yourself for not knowing better, and to commit to never abandoning yourself again for the sake of being loved. You begin to rebuild from a place of self-respect, not self-pity. You learn to validate your own existence without waiting for anyone else to stamp their approval. And from that place, you grow stronger, wiser, and more grounded. The person who once needed someone to choose them becomes someone who chooses themselves every single day. Healing isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it looks like sitting in silence, breathing through the ache, and choosing not to text her back. Sometimes it looks like taking long walks with your thoughts, journaling what hurts, or simply allowing yourself to cry without shame. Healing is often quiet and invisible, but it is powerful beyond measure. After the dust of heartbreak settles, there's a phase that follows, raw, unfamiliar, and uncomfortable. You're not quite broken anymore, but you're not yet whole either. You exist in this in-between space where nothing feels certain. But that space is where transformation begins. It's where you start asking questions you never had the courage to face before. Who am I without her? What do I actually want in a partner? What parts of me did I silence just to be accepted? These questions are the doorway to something deeper, a relationship with yourself that isn't built on performance or approval, but on authenticity. The truth is, love can sometimes distract you from the work you need to do within. When you're wrapped in someone else's world, it's easy to forget your own. You place your wounds on hold, suppress your insecurities, and hide your shadows just to maintain the illusion of happiness. But when that person leaves, those buried parts of you come rushing to the surface, and even though it's painful, that surfacing is a gift, because you cannot heal what you refuse to feel. In the solitude that follows a breakup, you finally have the emotional space to confront your pain. Not escape it, not numb it, but face it, understand it, and grow from it. You begin to notice patterns, how you tend to attract people who reflect your deepest fears, how you overgive to avoid abandonment, how you mistake emotional chaos for love. And once you recognize those patterns, you have the power to break them. That's where true healing happens, not when someone else comes to rescue you, but when you decide to rescue yourself. You stop looking for distractions and start building emotional resilience. You learn to self-soothe, to affirm your own worth, to be there for yourself in the moments you used to rely on her. You no longer beg for closure because you create it internally. You no longer chase clarity from her words because you find peace in your own. Healing also means learning to forgive, not just her, but yourself. Forgiving yourself for staying too long, for not knowing better, for giving your heart to someone who couldn't hold it properly. It's about releasing the guilt and accepting that you did the best you could with the emotional tools you had at the time. And now you're building new tools, stronger ones, more conscious ones. Tools that will help you love better in the future, but more importantly, love yourself better right now. Every day you show up for yourself in the smallest ways, by setting boundaries, by choosing peace over chaos, by prioritizing your mental health, your healing. One of the most powerful things you begin to understand after the heartbreak is that peace is more valuable than presence. Just because someone was physically with you doesn't mean they were emotionally available. Just because someone said they loved you doesn't mean they knew how to show up for you. And just because you had someone to text or sleep beside doesn't mean you were truly being seen, heard, or valued. That realization hurts at first, because when you're attached to someone, you hold onto the illusion of connection. You remember the moments when they smiled at you, held your hand, made promises. But over time, you start to see the gaps between those moments, the emotional distance, the unmet needs, the constant confusion, the way you felt more alone with them than without. That clarity doesn't come instantly. It comes in waves, in reflections, in small moments of truth, when you're no longer clouded by desire. And when it comes, it's liberating. You realize that losing her meant gaining your peace, that choosing to let go wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. You begin to see that love without peace isn't love. It's attachment. It's addiction. It's a fear of being alone disguised as devotion. And you don't need that kind of love anymore. You don't need the kind of love that keeps you anxious, second, guessing, and walking on eggshells. You don't need the kind of love that feels like a battlefield, where every disagreement becomes a war and every moment of vulnerability becomes ammunition. You need love that calms your nervous system. Love that brings clarity, not confusion. Love that feels like a safe space, not a survival test. And that kind of love starts with how you treat yourself. When you finally make peace your priority, everything changes. You stop engaging with people who trigger your wounds instead of helping you heal them. You stop giving second chances to those who repeatedly show you they can't meet you where you are. You stop trying to fix, to convince, to prove. Instead, you rest, you choose yourself, you protect your energy, and that protection is not a wall, it's a boundary. It's a declaration that you're no longer available for chaos, that you no longer romanticize dysfunction, that you're willing to be alone if it means being free. Peace becomes your compass. If it disturbs your soul, it's not for you. If it confuses you more than it comforts you, it's not aligned. And the more you choose peace, the more you attract relationships, friendships, connections, and eventually love that mirror that peace. People who don't need to be impressed, just understood. People who respect your silence, your space, your standards. People who come with presence, not pressure. And slowly you begin to redefine what love actually means to you. Not the high of being wanted, but the serenity of being truly valued. Not the chase, but the connection. Not the performance, but the presence. And in that quiet, grounded understanding, you find something you never had before. One of the most beautiful yet overlooked parts of healing is realizing that you don't need someone else to complete your story. For so long, We're conditioned to believe that a relationship, especially a romantic one, is the final piece of the puzzle that will make our lives whole. That someone is supposed to come into our world and bring the missing parts we've been searching for. But the truth is, you were never incomplete. You were never half of a whole. You've always been entire, always been worthy, always been capable of standing fully in your own light. It just took the silence after she left for you to remember that. And what a gift that is, because now you're not chasing someone to save you. You're not longing for someone to make life exciting or meaningful. You are learning how to give those things to yourself. You're waking up and creating joy without needing it to come from another person. You're setting goals, making progress, finding beauty in your own company, and building a life that reflects who you really are, not who you pretended to be to make a relationship work. That independence, that self-sufficiency, it's not loneliness, it's strength. It's the kind of foundation that ensures the next person who enters your life will complement your growth, not become your reason for it, because when you operate from a place of wholeness, your standards shift. You stop tolerating half love. You stop being drawn to relationships based on familiarity with pain. You begin choosing partners, friends, and environments that match your energy instead of drain it. That clarity comes from doing the inner work, from facing your truth, from letting the space that used to be filled by her become a space where your true self can rise. You now recognize that the ending was never about rejection. It was about redirection. You were being pulled back to your path, to your purpose, to your power. And maybe you had to go through the storm of loss to realize how much light you actually hold within. You start to see yourself differently, not as someone who was left behind, but as someone who walked through pain and emerged more grounded, more self-aware, more intentional. You begin to admire your ability to rise, to rebuild, to reclaim your narrative. You look in the mirror and finally see someone worth loving, not because someone else says so, but because you now believe it. And with that belief comes freedom. Freedom from needing validation. Freedom from compromising your truth. Freedom from mistaking love for struggle. You become the author of your own story again, and every page you write now is filled with self-respect, clarity, and emotional maturity. You realize that true love starts with you, how you talk to yourself, how you treat yourself, how you show up for yourself when the world goes quiet. And that love, the one you've now built within, becomes your new foundation.